the nerds. This is for the brainiacs. This what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back. You ain't gonna touch me. You not gonna do nothing. You are not above me. I bet you wish you was me. I know it. I know.
What a yak. What is poppin', everybody? And welcome back to another special episode of the Only Friends podcast. Well, you know, it's me and my only friends, and which includes, but it's not limited to, two Huskies that we're about to speak about.
Let's go. You getting them?
No, wait a minute.
What's poppin', squad?
Stop it. Hold on.
Wait.
Well, A, Conrad forgot his intro.
We get him?
B, don't know what he's talking about. C, what you so smiley for?
You got the Huskies? Are they downstairs?
I'm fired up today.
What you so smiley for, Blueberry?
I'm coming in spicy today. Landon's already picking a fucking fist fight that he's not going to win.
Oh, man.
We got a great show in store for you guys today. We're going to be discussing the meaningfulness of blockers and why me and Phil Galfon think that you're all wasting your time. Landon's getting nice and primed and ready for that fist fight. But before we get to that fist fight, we got a little other debate to talk about, which is indeed the Huskies.
Husky Gate.
However,
Husky Gate.
prior to getting to the bottom of what's going on with Royal and Blue, I don't remember. Kobe.
Gojo and Ghetto.
Oh, no offense
You're my
to
boy,
the owners,
Blue.
but those are terrible names. I want to remind everybody that we do have an academy coming up September 1st.
What a segue.
We have a few seats remaining. If you guys are interested in that, head to academy.solveforwhy.io. That'll be a 3-day cash academy where we go over game theory heuristics in the morning for the first 3 days, while you guys play an actual mock 5-10 game in the afternoon, and we do commentary over the top, pointing out your leaks and areas that you can improve upon as you move forward in your studies. Head over to academy.solveforwhy.io for that. Also, I think we have a little bit of a tease for On Second Thought, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully, we've faded it for like the last 4 shows, so if you want to roll that one.
The goal of being a studied player is not to get every single spot correct through rote memorization. The goal instead is to develop heuristics and general principles that will allow you to think multiple moves in advance at the range level. This will give us confidence when selecting an action or reaction, as well as our size. In this episode of On Second Thought, we're going to see a hand play out between Ewan McNicholas and Christian Soto that upon first glance appears to be played to perfection.
That will actually be the final episode of On Second Thought that I am personally narrating for at least the time being. As you saw, Ewan McNicholas is in this season, and he has graciously agreed to be the On Second Thought host moving forward. So stay tuned for that. Next week will be the first episode that he puts out, and I have to tell you, it's a good one. It's a real good one.
It looks good, cuz.
It looks good, cuz. It looks really good, cuz. You're gonna enjoy it. All right, let's get to these Huskies and why you're not responsible enough to have a dog.
Husky Gate. We've already.
Well, you've reached a conclusion. Why don't you walk the audience through, since you fucking...
Wait a minute. Don't tell me this is your fucking tease.
Since you fucking gaslit all of Twitter to make it sound like I'm the evil...
You are.
Monopoly man from fucking some evil show.
And you must
the
be
Minions.
the Monopoly guy.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you wear the hat, to cover your baldness. Like he does.
I don't know what that means.
That's what the Monopoly guy
He
does.
wears the hat because it's a classy top hat with his monocle.
And he's bald underneath.
You don't know what he looks like underneath there. He's a cartoon that's never taken the hat off. See, you jump to a lot of conclusions. This is why you are not fit to be a pup father.
I bet
not
we could
fit
find him
because
with the hat off.
The Godfather.
I bet the
Dog
internet
father, I meant.
has him with the hat off.
You could be the
somewhere.
dog father if you wanted to.
I could be, but I don't want to. So go on.
Well, you kind of do.
Tell us what happened with these Huskies.
What do you mean, tell us?
Well, you made a very viral post.
No, very viral is 100K is not very viral, buddy.
I mean, it's
100K.
not.
That's a lot of people.
It's not viral.
It's not viral.
It's a small city.
Yeah,
That's true. That's bigger than the
it's a
city
small
that they came from like 4 times.
4 times.
Maybe 12.
50. 50 times the population of Leechburg. 100,000.
That's absurd.
We have 2,700 people in our town.
I like when public
40
appeal
times.
likes to see you as the enemy.
Okay. Well, why don't you go ahead and explain what I did so terrible?
You didn't do anything terribly.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean?
I want to hear your side of the story
What
before
side of
I
what's-
tell my side
What side of what story?
of why we didn't get the dogs.
Why we didn't get the dogs?
Correct.
We're not
You
getting
didn't-
the dogs?
You tell me.
Oh shit!
Matt-
We're going back and forth. What's
No,
going on?
no.
Yo, you gotta tell me something. I'm on the edge of my seat.
Why is he
I don't know
smiling?
anything.
I'm
like-
scared. He's smiling like this.
I just want to hear it from
I
your
don't know
mouth.
what's going on right now.
I just want you to say it publicly that you chose not to get the dogs.
Of course, I chose not to get the dogs.
Okay, why?
I chose not to get the dogs because I have a life to live, and dogs would stop me from living my life.
Okay.
And I don't want to put the responsibility on somebody else.
Well, it was always going to fall on someone else.
Who's that someone else?
That was going to be me, Brian, and that's why I was charging $1,500 a month for his lack of responsibility. So,
And honestly,
Wait, so
wasn't
you're saying they
it
can
was
get the
unfair.
dogs, but he has to pay you $1,500 a
okay,
month?
so here was the agreement that I came up with. I talked it over amongst the roommates. Obviously, Conrad was 100% in. Landon was 100% in. Melissa was 100% out. Corey didn't care, but I gave Corey's vote 3x because he's the dog father. And I want new dog, or I shouldn't say new dogs. I want more dogs, but I also don't particularly want huskies because they are a lot.
He's dogist.
Well,
He's selectivist.
I mean,
If they were
look,
pit bulls, you would have taken them.
they are, yeah, absolutely, in a heartbeat.
See?
We wouldn't have had this conversation. You wouldn't have had the chance for them to be your dogs. They would have been my dogs.
That's fine.
the dog's got too much dog in
It's
him.
nothing. It's not like I don't love huskies. I grew up with a husky shepherd mix. It was one
Yeah.
of the best dogs I ever had. Shout out to Bonkers, R.I.P.
Oh, bonkers.
He
His name
the
is
best.
Bonkers.
Yeah.
What a name.
What a great name.
What a good name.
I have good dogs.
I thought he was just calling him
don't.
bonkers. Not
No, that was his name,
He was bonkers.
and we called him Bonky.
Bonky.
That's great.
He was the best. My uncle used to get him high all the time. It was terrible.
MGG Bonky.
Anyway,
So he lived a long, healthy life.
Yeah, long healthy. He actually did for a husky. I think he lived till he was like 14 or 15.
Yeah, exactly.
But man, he was in rough shape at the end. Like their fur gets like matted, starts falling off.
you know,
He was
you know what
really
you feed
fat.
Gatsby right now, right? CBD.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Well, it's no. No.
Don't do this.
Not the same
Yeah,
thing.
Unc knew this for a while, man. He was just trying to keep pup.
I mean,
you
he
know,
was
feeling well.
trying to medicate his own back pain, you know. So he was a husky shepherd mix, really loyal dog, incredibly gentle. With like my uncle had kids while he had. Basically, the long and short of it was he was my dog when I was like 7, and I had to give him up obviously because my mother was unfit to care for us, let alone an animal.
Nice.
My uncle took him and raised him, and so I had access to him for most of my childhood. But like, you know, my uncle had kids and like he was great with the kids. Huskies are amazing creatures, but they're a lot. They're a lot of responsibility. And whether they were huskies or not, what I know about Landon is he gets very excited and then doesn't do shit. Kind of like his role with the company.
Relax.
We're still waiting for that quarterly course you've been promising for a
pretty-
year now.
Pretty accurate.
Promise is a different word I would use.
Well, yeah, you're right. We won't get into it. Anyway, so this notion of like him being gun-ho and Daddy, I want a new dog was just like, okay.
2 new dogs.
I know how this works. I'm going to end up getting 2 new dogs, and I'm very busy, particularly at the moment. Like, I had already been considering getting a puppy because my dogs are 12 and 10, and, you know, I wanted to bring in the next generation before they pass. But now is just like really a terrible time. I'm playing a lot. I'm traveling. It's just not a great time for me to try to train a puppy. And even though these huskies are adults, they're still going to require some pampering, some training, and, you know, some housebreaking of sorts. Like, I don't know if they're trained for a doggy door. Probably not. And then we have to, like, husky-proof the backyard to make sure they don't escape, as they already have. So, you know, it was a lot. And I was like, okay, well, if Landon wants to take on that burden of responsibility, I'll get the dogs. And Melissa was kind of on board for this, too. However, I need insurance. So 2 things. 1, huskies shed more than all 3 of our dogs put together.
And your dog shed a lot.
No.
That's saying a lot.
No, they really. Rudy does. I don't think my dogs are short-haired.
The black dog.
They-
I mean,
they don't
Scout's-
really shred that.
Every
Scout's
time I
hairs
go to
everywhere.
your house and then I leave your house, I just have hair covered all over my body from head to toe.
You're welcome.
Scout's white. That's why.
When you
know,
walk
that
in the
doesn't-
door and you immediately hug the dogs, you're going to be hairy.
I do hug the dogs.
They're not Chauncey level of shedding. Chauncey, like, I would walk out of here feeling like I had
Yeah.
a face mask of fur. So
living
anyway,
his best life.
I was like, okay, well, number 1, we're going to need the house cleaned much more frequently. Right now, it's once every other week. If you agree to get the house cleaned every week and pay for half the cleanings, dogs are yours. And in that fee, I will also ensure that they're groomed once a month and that they have food, because you can't be trusted to do these things.
Right.
So $1,500 out the gate.
You
monthly.
entrust someone else to do them.
It doesn't. I hire someone else to do them. It doesn't matter how it gets done. It will always get done under my watch. My dogs don't go hungry. Your dogs will.
No, they wouldn't.
What are you doing in 3 weeks?
What do you mean?
What are you doing in 3 weeks?
Maybe going to Vancouver.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
I may be going to Vancouver.
Literally a day and a half ago, he was gone to Vancouver for a month. Sold. It was a done deal.
It's 99%. So maybe.
I may be. I also may not be.
Okay, sure.
That's how maybe works.
Okay. So I thought that this was a very fair way of lightening the burden on the rest of the roommates to bring 2 other dogs in, because now we're going to have the house cleaned twice as frequently. That's nice for them. And it's nice for me. You know, fresh sheets, hairless living room, dishes are done. It's nice. It's nice. That's a good compromise. Plus, we get 2 new lovely animals. Seems reasonable.
Right. And
Landon runs to Twitter and goes, mean old Uncle Matt wants to charge me $1,500 to get 2 new dogs. Can you believe this asshole?
That's balderdash.
Wow, Landon.
And then
He's a bad guy.
And then the thread goes, what a bad guy. He's a bad guy.
Yeah.
You're a bad guy. And so
so
I
good.
had to come into the thread
I
and
knew
be
it was
like,
going to happen.
and be like, listen, all of you people that are saying $1,500 is way too much for 2 dogs. You could get your own house and blah, blah, blah. It's like, all right. He pays $800 of rent for a 4,000 square foot house
Dig it
and a
out.
half acre backyard. What do you think he's going to get for $2,300 a month and 2 huskies? He's going to get a fucking box in one of the sewer drains between here and the strip.
Yeah.
And that's about the extent of it. So for everybody in that thread, you guys got to learn a little bit of tough love for someone who's completely and utterly irresponsible for even themselves.
I'm not irresponsible for
No?
myself.
When was the last time you bought protein?
Who cares? I
Right.
pay half the fucking fee.
Who does all the legwork?
Tammy.
Me.
No, you don't.
I'm
Tammy does.
I'm the relay guy.
So,
No.
you said, no, I don't want the dogs.
Don't do this, Brian.
I couldn't believe it. I asked him.
You said, you
I
know
said-
what? This extra $1,500 in my pocket is so much better than those lovable dogs.
That's
I
not
couldn't
what
believe
happened.
it.
That's what you
I
said?
was so surprised
It's
when you
not-
said this.
Pretty easy to determine how much you really want something when you put a price tag on it.
It's not about money. It's about the responsibility. Because I know 3 months later, if the dogs did stay in the house, they'd say these fucking dogs are unbearable.
No, but they would be mine at that point.
Doesn't matter.
Who cares? I'll kick all of you out. But what's the difference? That's the whole thing. You can't say it would be the responsibility because that's what you were paying the price for. I was becoming your Tammy, in essence.
Well, Tammy was becoming your double
It was
Tammy.
a $1,500 insurance that when you decided you were going to wash your hands of the dog, I would say, okay, they're mine now, but someone else is paying for them. Basically, it was child support for the dogs. That's what we were drawing up.
Oh, man.
So what happens to the dogs now?
They're
Are
dead.
they just dead?
Oh my god! Are we gonna go to the funeral?
They euthanized them.
no, they did not.
Stop it.
I called them today. I said, what happened to those 2 dogs? And they're like, well, we heard Landon didn't want them via Twitter, and we had to put them down.
Stop smiling. I'm scared.
I did call about the dogs. I do have an update. They're back with their owners.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that that's good, but
Well,
it's an ending.
yeah.
That's why they never called me back yesterday. I was unsure why.
Oh.
So it was.
Does that mean
it was a non-issue anyhow?
Does that mean that you couldn't have got the dogs anyways?
Correct.
Because they had first dibs, obviously.
Well, so
As long as they paid for.
yeah, they had to pay the fines and everything, but it was kind of strange because the guy who called me yesterday said the owners never came to pick the dogs up. We're going to put them up for adoption tomorrow, but we wanted to give you a first right of refusal. So if you can let us know by the end of the day, we'll handle it or whatever. And I was like, okay, no problem. They were like, okay, we'll call you back at the end of the day just to be sure. I'm like, all right. Somewhere between that phone call at like noon and 7 p.m. when they closed, the owner showed up and picked them up. I wonder what would have happened if I would have just said, I'm on my way. Right? Like, for them, honestly, I bet the owners just get kind of dicked over there.
Yeah, I mean.
Right? Because like once they have somebody who's willing to pay, they're just a shelter. They don't
Right.
care about
Yeah.
the original owner getting them back.
They don't do underhanded dealings.
Yeah, well, I mean, they just put a time frame on things, and whenever
Right. There's someone willing to pay for the know that they're going to a good home. Like
Right.
the dogs are going to be saved, so they're just like
The
okay,
only
yeah.
thing I heard out of all of this is Berkey wants 2 pit bull puppies.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I heard.
Yeah,
Not 2.
but
All right, fine.
3.
3. You said more puppies, as in you want more dogs, not one more
Just
dog, like 2 more dogs.
A whole litter. Really.
Yeah, like you don't want one.
okay.
About 7.
All right. Well, for every new puppy I get, I remove 1 human from the house.
All right, so we get
Bro,
2
you
puppies.
are so high on the chopping block list. You have no idea how close you are to just showing up with your clothes in the driveway one day.
No dogs included.
Wait, can I have a dog?
No,
Oh no.
absolutely not. Corey's the only one who solidified his spot. Snake Lady's fucking next.
Everybody else is on the chopping block.
That's right.
Snake sis is gone.
So Landon's like, we were discussing it. He's like, well, how do I get out of the $1,500 fee? And I go, easy. You move out. You move out and you take your dogs with you.
Yep.
You take your dogs with
I
you.
mean, you could do it Big Brother style. You know, you just vote someone out of the house.
I mean,
Well, you're head of household, so you can't. You can nominate 2 people to be voted, then the rest of the house votes them out.
So I'll just nominate someone in Corey every week,
right,
and then give Corey immunity.
You can't give anyone immunity.
Yep,
I
he
can
can
do
win the
whatever I
veto.
want.
Yeah.
So that's the update on the pups. It's a very bittersweet end, but probably for the best. And I imagine I'm going to see these dogs again.
Yeah, tomorrow on your walk,
They know
be
where
out
we
there.
live now. You know, I mean, like,
That's true. If they get lost, they just come down and get some water. You know.
what do you think? What do you think the procedure is if they get lost again and I'm the one to recover them? Like, what's your next step there? Is it to go the route of calling animal control again? Is it just to say, fuck it, they're mine? Like, these dogs chose me kind of thing?
Wow.
I mean, what do they say if you let something go and it comes back? Or what's that?
Yeah,
you know where I'm
Let it
going.
go. They come
No,
back.
Matt doesn't love them because he wouldn't take them because they're not pit bulls.
No, I do love them. I
No.
just don't want them. There's a difference. It's kind of like you.
It's not even true. Don't make these jokes for the people. It's not even true. You don't mean it.
Man. You missed the gym today.
I selectively chose not to go to the gym. I took a rest day for the first time in 3 weeks.
You were just traveling for 3 weeks.
I was in the gym every day when I was traveling.
Oh, in the gym every day.
You take Lance with you?
I did not. No,
We're gonna have. I was. It's funny. The Huskies led me down this path, but apparently there are GPS tracking collars you can get for your dogs.
or humans.
Well, that's where I was going with this. We might have to get you one next. But yeah, I was going to get one for Gatsby and Scout, and then I thought about it.
Gatsby doesn't move.
I was like, these two aren't fucking going anywhere. I could leave the front door wide open for a week,
That's true.
and they would never make it past the property line. Like, they know how good they have it. It's fine. But then I was like, well, if we get these Huskies, we're going to need this device for sure. Just have it actually comes with an app. It's pretty sick. It tells you, like, the only reason I was going to get it for Gatsby and Scout is because it tells you, like, how many steps they take in a day. How many like it's like a whoop. It's like a fucking whoop for dogs.
You want to track their fucking stats?
I mean, yeah. Like, if I got 2 new puppies, absolutely I would. Because, you know, I'm just guessing Gatsby's decline at this point, right?
How many steps do you think Gatsby takes a day?
Oh,
And mind you, he gets to take 4.
It might be under 100. I saw him coming down the steps yesterday. It was brutal. He was doing fucking hopscotch like a bunny.
He takes one trip to Corey's room. He takes one trip out of Corey's room, and then he just kind of goes around the living room.
Yeah, he really does only go to Corey's room once a day at most.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
he
it's
has to, like, really be feeling
It's
it.
hard to get up those stairs for that old man. It's
I
kind of
agree.
slippery for him.
Look, he doesn't need to go up there.
Bunnies be.
He does.
No.
That's where his buddy Corey is.
That's okay. Corey can
Is
come
Corey the
downstairs.
dog whisperer at that?
He is.
Him and Scout have a very special bond. We're not really sure how it happened. I think that...
This is the jealousy coming out of Matt, right?
No. I actually I have a fairly good idea how it happened. When I lived at my last house with Dan and a couple other guys, we had a temporary roommate who had like a 3-year-old pit bull, and she was the most lovable little ham I've ever seen in my life. And her and Scout just got along tremendously because all they fucking cared about was a warm body. And like he would, a roommate would like go to work all day or whatever, and I really didn't have a lot going on. I was basically just like going to the gym and hanging out at the house. So I'd be in bed watching TV for a few hours a day, and like I would just have them on each side anchoring me. And it's like, oh, this is what love is to you too, for sure. But then,
Cuddle.
you all right?
Yeah, it's fine.
It looked like you just threw up a little bit.
No.
Okay. Just checking, man. I want to make sure your well-being's okay.
No, you don't. You don't care about me. No, you don't.
Oh man,
Too good. It's too.
Conrad didn't put up much of a fight for these dogs. I'm a little surprised.
What do you mean?
I mean, you were a little quiet.
No, he has to take his responsibility of paying for him for it to happen, and then I would help.
He just shirks it all
Why
onto
didn't-
you.
I don't know. I don't understand why you didn't just say you'll pay the
This was not
$1,500 and
tabbable.
then put it on a tab. Yeah.
This was not tabbable.
Put it on a tab.
There was no chance in
Not
hell.
tabbable.
I will
We had
say
a conversation going, you know.
I will say there was a little bit.
On tap.
It was a little sharp on Landon's side to say no, because the reason I called today wasn't to find out the status or anything along those lines. It was to let them know that if they weren't adopted in like a month, that I would obviously take them.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to see them, get split up or euthanized.
Yeah.
How
But
do you spell euthanized?
EUTH.
No, how does Conrad spell
EUTHANIZED?
euthanized?
YOO.
Euthanized.
Bro, when we were talking about the Huskies and we said we had a pool in the backyard, and Matt said, "Do you think they swim?" And then Conrad wrote, "I think they're scuba divers." SCOOB.
Well, I wrote that on purpose.
Sure you did.
Oh, you
Conrad.
guys are absolute idiots if you don't think I wrote
Scuba
scuba.
dooba doo.
You guys are absolute idiots.
I gotta tell
Speaking
you,
of dogs, I would Dumb and Dumber.
There's six
My
people in
God.
that. There's 6 people in that chat, and nobody thought you did that
You're
intentionally.
call Corey. Somebody call Corey.
Okay,
He knows I did.
Enough.
I really,
Enough with the cap.
I really felt like I did myself, and I wrote euthanized like he would write it.
well,
because of that.
he spelled it YO whatever, and I was like, this isn't funny. He goes, of course it is. I go, no, it's not. Conrad just thinks that's how it's spelled.
No, you guys are retarded. Dumb and
You're a
fucking,
bad guy.
dumb
Yeah.
and fucking dumb.
Wait a minute.
Bad guy.
All I know is that we
Yeah,
have.
euthanasia is 3 words. Youth in Asia.
All I've heard from this entire conversation is we are still
Not getting
puppyless.
dogs. Yes, that's correct.
For now.
that is the current update. We are not.
Well,
getting
we
dogs.
being you, because I don't want a dog.
Now you don't want a dog.
It's not
Wow.
that, it's not that I don't
You know
want
what I'm
a
gonna
dog.
do? I'm gonna
I don't
spend-
want responsibility for a dog.
You should just get a cat. Because you don't have to take
The
care of
cat
a cat.
can't stay in the house is the problem.
Cat can stay in the house.
Why not?
You guys wait
Gotta
till
be
the
fun in the
fucking
house.
weekend.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the animal shelter. I'm gonna start taking pictures and sending them to the chat.
You already did it with Pet Finder.
Doesn't do anything to me.
Cats can live on their own for like months.
Cats are cool. Ebony
Don't
has
stay in food
Ebony
and
has the
water.
cat.
The only concern with having a cat at the house is that they figure out the doggy door, and then become hunters.
Mm.
I don't want that life.
You don't want that life?
I don't
You
want
don't-
rabbits and
You don't want
lizards and
Chauncey.
shit.
You don't
getting
want
drugged
Chauncey
up.
too.
No. Marley used to like send me daily pictures of what Chauncey would retrieve for her. It was like, today it's a snake, tomorrow it's a bird. Here's a lizard.
I've seen the
There's
cat.
a rat behind the refrigerator. It's like, okay, enough.
Cats have like
Like,
faster.
He wouldn't always like bring them to kill them or like to present to her. He'd like bring them to fuck with them.
Bro, I remember when the bird walked into the house. Do you remember when the bird
It
with the
did not
fucked up
walk.
wing? It was like fucked up wing, and I saw Rudy, Scout, and Gatsby just like basically McGregor walk at this bird that goes into the house and they hid behind the food bowl.
Oh yeah, that one.
You remember food bowl, bro?
Yeah. There was another one that
There's another one.
I had the pocket door open, and this bird like at dusk just like flew straight through the pocket door in the living room. And when I tell you, this was like watching Air Jaws in real. It might have been the last athletic thing Gatsby's ever done. This bird hits the living room like right before the coffee table, and Gatsby just launches out of the abyss and just catches the bird midair and shreds it right in the middle of the living room.
R.I.P. bird.
Yeah, that one
R.I.P.
didn't make
Birdo,
it. There
yeah.
were feathers everywhere. Like, what the hell just happened?
Gatsby turns up when it's time to.
Yeah, he doesn't like them birds. He actually knows the word birds.
Yeah, of course.
You want to go get the birds? And he's like,
Which way are the birds?
Wow, what a screech that was.
yeah. Who? All right, let's get to the main topic at hand, a little bit of poker. Is there anything else going on that I need to touch on before we talk about this?
I don't know.
Nothing's
Oh,
happening.
yes, there is.
What's happening?
Young Jeremiah has decided
yes.
to move on
F in the chat.
from the
He was
bankroll
not.
challenge.
He was not trolling.
It was not a speed run.
It almost was.
It almost was. I mean, yeah, let's call it he got to the final end boss, had him within 1 hit point, and then
Developer
died an
error.
abrupt of death.
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do?
What is fucking batteries?
Yeah,
the batteries in
The
control.
battery died. Yeah, the battery
Somebody
died.
turned off the TV. He got fucked and then could never get his
There
way
was
back.
a power outing.
Power outage.
Basically,
R.I.P.,
one
buddy.
pot away from.
It's so
Well,
big.
like if he really wanted to just do it, at the time he was like multi-tabling like high stakes and stuff.
Yeah.
He could have just quit all those games, went to like 50 cents a dollar,
Right,
won
and
like
just-
$10,
Right.
and just called
And
it.
then, yeah.
But
Effectively, yeah, for sure.
instead, you know, he battled because he's a fucking battler. He's a G, and he ended up losing back 100.
He lost a ton playing high stakes heads up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like what he was trying to convey, he did.
Which
What?
is
Like beat mid stakes, well, effectively high stakes now online, like 2.5, 5.10, 10.20, and do very, very well. And then when you play 50-100 against Blesnik, you might just get wrecked for five buy-ins at 100, 200.
I think the second he was getting Blez action heads up, the bankroll challenge should have became $1 million challenge. Because like
Blesnik is fucking emptying accounts on WSOP.
I know,
right
I saw.
now.
He's the
Yeah,
world
he's
ender.
playing I lose bets. That's the guy's Twitter's name.
Yeah.
Heads up on.
What's God or what's good?
Yeah, and he's playing him heads up on WSOP. I guess 100, 200, I think it is. And he's absolutely fucking.
I saw a screenshot of
wrecking
him with 160K in front of him.
Yeah.
absolutely wrecking him.
Shout out to
Absurd.
Blez and sports cards.
Sports cards.
God bless sports cards. We got to get him off those WSOP streets and into the live realm. Or maybe I'll load up
You
my
play
What
account.
do you
with him a
mean?
little
He's
bit.
having a fucking blast online. You think he's
I know.
going anywhere?
That's the problem. Is like it's not even worth me loading up my account because he's getting enough PLO action where he'll never come and sit. But maybe
Maybe he'll play you.
he would play me. I think
He's also ending people's careers,
I'm welcome.
left and right.
God, I would want nothing more than a Jared Blesnik career ender. I'll
You
get
already
in-
had one with Rob Young.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll get into the sports card business tomorrow. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. You got those rookies?
How does that world even work? Like, how much money is there?
I mean, there was a lot for a minute. I think that it may have turned into a bit of a bubble, but who knows? It's difficult to say with that kind of stuff. But yeah,
Husky.
Jeremiah said that he'd be happy to come on the pod at some point. I know he's playing Bally's Big Bet tonight. A little 25-50. I believe it's kind of reggae. I think it's like him.
It's pretty reggae. It's
Nick,
him,
Nick
Kier.
Marchington, Kier,
Yep, Dave Richards.
Poker with a Purpose.
Yep, and
That Beardo?
Yeah, Beardo.
two more people that we know. But
Why is his name Beardo?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I've never. That's of all the names I know him by. That's like the third or fourth one that I think of. I don't know. My headphones just died.
CT, Jared Griner, Ryan LaPlante, and Marchington.
Oh man.
All right,
You know,
wait,
See,
we're
like,
waiting.
look at what happened to Matt. This is what happened to Jeremiah on the bankroll challenge.
LaPlante's playing 25-51.
Yeah.
Okay,
He's in the
I
streets.
didn't know he dabbled in those streets.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen him on one of these live streams, but he's in there.
You know Jeremiah's gonna go on like the sickest heater now. Like this is over.
He's down 25,000 at the moment.
No, I'm talking about after the stream. Yeah.
Hopefully.
He's just gonna. Yeah, he's just
I mean,
gonna
he's,
crush it
he's also just the best. He'll
Yeah.
be fine.
for sure.
You know. I mean, it seems pretty reggy.
Mm.
I wonder, it's tomorrow. So they're supposed to be having a blast of a lineup. I think it's supposed to be 100, 200.
Okay.
And the lineup is supposed to be nothing but
Fun players.
fun players. People that want to have fun.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true.
I mean,
Everybody wants to have fun.
I saw what the lineup was
I think it got canceled.
within the last 12 hours.
Yep, Eric Person backed out.
Oh, womp womp. That just
Mamma
went all
mia.
backwards.
Yep, sorry to say, RIP stream. F's in the chat.
F's in the chat.
I mean, maybe they still pull it off, but last I heard that Person wasn't going to play, and I imagine
GL
he's
live
kind of
regs.
the crux to that sort of game.
I mean, there was a couple. There was a bunch of names I didn't know, and they had job titles next to them.
Okay, well,
So-
I mean, someone we know was once a startup investor, an angel investor, even.
Actually,
Somebody was.
you got names for me? I can maybe suss a little bit of it out for you.
I don't honestly.
Okay, well that's not really worth anything to us then.
Well, this has been worth nothing, and we'll see you later. And we'll see you.
And that's Conrad's contribution for the day. Let's move right along.
See you guys later.
All right, Conrad, why don't you tell me a
I'm
little
out.
bit about blockers?
They're
And-
fucking not real.
Oh no, he's taking that side.
They're not real.
All right, let's have a spirited debate
They
because
always have it.
here's the thing. I obviously lean towards Phil's side of, stop obsessing over blockers and instead pick the play that makes you the most money. That's very much a live sentiment, right?
This tweet didn't really pop off. It didn't get, the algorithm didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of just a small little aside. This wasn't one of his long threads or
Husky Gate outperformed it.
Well, Husky dogs are a big part of the algorithm. Okay,
For sure, they have to be.
Dogs are a big part of gaming the algorithm.
You just got to start adding them.
You know how Lynn
business?
puts a half naked photo for engagement? Like we could just do that with dogs.
Probably.
Which is crush.
Try it.
My reply with Gatsby in it had like 45,000
Man,
views.
I loved my reply so much to that because I wasn't talking about Gatsby, but everyone thought I was talking about Gatsby.
Yeah. You're a bad guy.
Yeah.
Talking
Bad
about my
guy.
fucking dog dying.
Talking
I'll
about
show
you.
Okay, so
Don't you talk about Mr. Gatsby like that?
I would never.
all right,
The blockers.
on to the topic at hand. All right, so listen, here's
Block you.
I kind of have to like argue against my side initially so that this doesn't become too one-sided of a debate, but clearly blockers matter and are totally relevant to game theory and developing a strategy. That isn't really debatable in my opinion. What is debatable, I think, is the way that we've kind of twisted this term to be all-encompassing of anything that essentially interacts with a board in some sort of capacity. I don't think that was like the initial intent or the way that it best benefits newer players to think about blocking,
I mean,
so
like
to speak.
community-wide perception of blockers isn't what it's supposed to
Well,
be.
it just kind of keeps expanding, right? Because we keep learning more and
like unblockers.
well, yeah, sort of, I guess. But like what I'm more so saying is that like we keep learning more about the game and we keep drifting further away from the starting point by which we first entered this realm of study. So when really high level people start talking about this, and then remove the high level and go to the next tier, which is going to be a lot of the one-on-one type of coaching that you see, there is a big disconnect from the person who is just being introduced to this term for the first time. Because if I know nothing about poker and I say, Landon, what's a blocker? What would you tell me?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Well, just like, generally answer the question.
What? Well, I mean, blockers in the sense of like card removal versus like how they can be used in different nodes of the game tree, right? We look at a certain blocker effect where it's like you can use a card can be good or a card can be bad, but then you have to get into using a blocker in an aggressive node, using a blocker in a passive node. Now there's a bunch of different ways. Like it's hard to.
If I don't know what a blocker is,
it's hard to get across.
Right, but like if I don't know
work.
what a blocker is, I don't know how to differentiate between nodes in the game tree.
He said, if I'm a brand new player and I don't know what blockers are,
Well, there's aggressive blockers and
well, the issue is like
explain it to me like I'm 5.
it's hard because blocker is the wrong word.
yes, I believe. Well, I don't think it's the wrong word.
It's a loaded term.
I think blocker is a correct term for something. I just think that we've made it an umbrella term that represents both card removal as well as nut removal as well as
Pre-flop good card range removal.
yeah, right. So like it both means a reduction in frequency and an elimination of combinations.
If you ask somebody what position is, you can explain that very simply.
Yes.
Someone that's 5.
Yes,
If someone
very
says what is a blocker,
it's a problem.
tougher,
Which is why I kind of argue that it's not a macro concept in the game.
because you can't explain it to a 5-year-old.
Not only that, but you can't learn it prior to learning everything else. Where like I can teach you position with you having no other knowledge of the game.
Right.
It's very easy.
Like why? Like you can explain very quickly the advantage of going last.
Yeah, I can teach you EV without you knowing anything else about the game. Like EV applies outside of poker. Like these are things that are very tangible and very much high level global parts of the strategy. When you get to something like blocker,
You can block people on social media, but that's different.
right? So
I remove you from my life. Like I removed the nut flush here.
right. So like my first introduction to blockers obviously was like PLO way before solvers or anything along those lines were really introduced. In a lot of ways, PLO helped shape the evolution of modern game theory in Hold'em. Like I think it helped advance it faster than the tools available allowed for. Like I've used the term blocker since 2009 maybe. Right?
It's a lot more binary in the sense of trying to find like, oh, I have nut blocker, I have full house
Exactly.
blockers. When you look at PLO, it's like, where am I going to bluff from?
Right.
And you use that to no limit.
Right. Well, the only introduction that was relevant for the better part of a decade was the nut flush blocker. That was just it.
That's always been the one.
It was just
Right.
it's the most clear-cut example of like what a blocker means, because I guess no matter what you're talking about, when you're talking about blocking, you're always reducing a frequency. The difference being is that like when you're talking about the nut flush blocker, you're reducing a frequency to 0.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, I have the ace of spades, he never has the nuts,
Correct.
right? So his nuts are exactly 0% frequency. Therefore, I have the freedom to bluff.
Right.
And prior to the evolution of poker, that was a big deal because the second nuts would just fold.
Yeah.
Right? So when you had fold equity against the second nuts, blocking the nuts was very important.
Right.
Now, and it's funny because I'm kind of arguing against myself a bit. Now, that's a little bit less relevant. So yes, you block the absolute nuts, right? But his flush frequency is just reduced.
Yeah.
It's not down to 0.
People will call you with the second nut flush.
Yeah, of course. But, you know, being able to remove the nut flush removes the majority of flush combinations because you're going to play all suited aces.
Right. In the sense of blocker, you would use it in that sense as blocking the calling range.
Right.
Like you block them from calling you ever.
Right.
Which
And
makes it the blocker.
I think that nails the concept, in my opinion, is when you're thinking or when you're trying to find an applicable way to utilize blockers to your benefit, it's looking at it through the segments of the range. Do I block calls? Do I unblock folds?
Right.
When the answer to both of those are yes, we have a very powerful key card. When the answer only to one is yes, then we have a moderate key card. When the answer is no, then we have no key cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the simple generic way of looking at it. But like what I replied to in line in this thread was, and this was kind of a response to Patrick, because I think, obviously I know what he's saying is correct, but I think it's only correct on the margins. So in other words, I think it's only correct in environments where you're kind of making or breaking your bottom line on these very precise nodes of getting your 0 EV hands as close to right as possible. And basically he said, don't best blockers equal the most money? Isn't that the point? And I kind of said, like, that's pretty rare, right? Like most of the time when we're examining blockers when making a decision, it means that we're actually in a 0 EV node, right? Whether we're betting or checking.
If you're looking at through your terms of like way back when of like having nut blocker, that would be an example of the highest EV. Right? Because now if you have the ace of spades, they don't call anymore, which makes the EV of you bluffing with that card higher.
I don't think the EV becomes higher. It's still 0.
Why?
Bluffs are 0.
Well, bluffs are 0 if people call appropriately.
We're only talking theory, though. You can't keep jumping. Sorry, I don't mean to say you, but I'm saying people can't.
The prodigal you.
Yeah, people can't marry the two concepts together of in theory X happens, but in practice Y occurs, and therefore I'm going to start to argue for theory and then jump immediately to exploits. So bluffs are either 0 EV or they're not. If they're not, then your blockers aren't as relevant as you think, right? Because like you're just going to have a ton of information.
Well, a bluff could be negative if you don't have the blocker. Like you don't bluff certain cards.
Yeah, that's true. But that's not. But in theory, that's not a bluff.
It's a give up.
It's a mistake.
It's a blunder.
Yes. Right. So like this is what I'm saying is when you're looking at it through the bluffing node or the bluff catching node, you're always going to be looking at a 0 EV spot, or most commonly you're going to be looking at a 0 EV spot. And what's happening is we're drilling down to something very precise where we're saying, okay, nothing else is giving me an answer here because my hand is worth exactly 0. It's neutral. And I'm not positive of the frequencies. So I'm going to lean on blockers here to determine if this is a higher frequency call or a lower frequency call. Like I said, when you go through the checkboxes, it's like, okay, I have removal to calls and, I have an abundance of folds. Therefore, this is a positive blocker. Therefore, it's going to be a higher frequency play, right? So now maybe you bluff this hand like close to pure whenever that's the case. But if you have the inverse where it's like, okay, I unblock all their calls and I block most of their folds, well, then now the frequency might be pretty close to 0, right? And when you're somewhere in between, you're just going to flip a fucking coin. The whole point of it is that whenever you find yourself in that decision-making process, it means that you're in a situation where the only way that you're going to make errors anyway is going to be on the frequency by which you take the action. If you do anything purely, it's probably going to be an error in the long run because you're in a zero EV node. You need to be able to mix calls and folds, raises and folds, whatever the case may be, right? But in live, and I think this is Phil's greater point, most zero EV nodes are probably either just winning a lot or losing a lot, dependent upon your opponent.
Zero's not real.
It really, there's an equilibrium for live. It's just we have almost no vision over it because the imbalances are so fucking great.
Yeah.
So, if you're facing a river decision, whether it's should I bluff this candidate or not, should I call this candidate or not, and the pot's really fucking big, hundreds of big blinds, and you're against a player type X, which maybe represents somebody who doesn't bluff often enough or doesn't bluff catch enough. That's enough information for you to just take action.
Yeah, the issue is how accurate, which is a different conversation of like how accurate you think that is.
Well, I guess
like from ego driven versus just like I want someone to fold, so I think he's not going to call enough.
That's not. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's
like,
up to your interpretation.
Correct, and sometimes that's skewed.
I understand, and I agree with you. I think that's true, but
like you can say, oh, this guy doesn't bluff catch enough, but he just does, or
wow,
well in a spot, or well maybe he does or doesn't. Who knows, right? But it's a matter of degrees of confidence.
Yeah,
like certain hands, like certain bluffs become better based off your degree of confidence in certain spots.
What was the hand that Melissa sent you earlier?
Which one?
Whatever one you read. I didn't even read it.
Oh, she had the nuts and was like concerned on like bet sizes.
Damn, that's a shame. I was like so.
It wasn't a bluff catch.
I was so confident it was going to be like something that was one way or the other pretty close.
No,
like those are the only hands that we discuss.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at is that like I can't think of too many spots where I think to myself in game and say like, fuck, I've red queens here instead of black queens. I would definitely continue with black queens. Like it's pretty fucking rare because what's driving me to make my decision is how truncated the range is that I'm facing. Yeah. This guy's just way too tight. So it doesn't really matter if I have black queens or red queens on this 9 high board that's 2 spades or whatever.
Like a backdoor flush is good.
Yeah, having the extra hidden equity is nice, but my point that I'm getting at is that like if you find yourself in scenarios where it's like you have what has shrunken down to being a marginal holding, right? Like where you're in a 4-bet pot with queens versus somebody who just isn't ever going to have jacks and may not have ace king enough. You're just like really in a difficult spot where queens are as good as 9s in a lot of regards. And trying to decipher whether or not the suit is going to be what dictates your decision-making process is kind of a fool's errand, right? Like, just happy fold because you're not getting bluffed enough. Or just happy get it in because they're too wide and they have ace-10 off in this spot.
Well, yeah, these are the deviations that are going to... that you gamble win you more than theoretical play style.
Yeah, here's a great example of a situation where... I don't think it really mattered all that much. I'm trying to think if my hand was really relevant. I was thinking of a hand that I played on big bet. It was like a 4-bet pot where I 4-bet aces and Shota had called. So he like cold called a 3-bet and then called my 4-bet squeeze. Sure. And it came like 9 high 2 hearts, and I think I had aces with the ace of hearts. And I ended up going like c-bet flop, check call turn, check call off, river. And I remember in game saying something along the lines of my suit being what was driving my decision.
To check the turn.
No. To ultimately like call off. Like I want to say like 3 hearts presented in the board paired or something like that. And I was basically just like saying out loud, like, you have 9s full here almost always. It was like a 9-6, 3 something board with the flush completing. And I just kept saying like over and over again, like, you have 9s full here, like yada yada yada, whatever. But I was like, I either had the ace of hearts or didn't have the ace of hearts. Whatever the case was, it just like I leaned into the fact that my suits were driving the call decision. But the truth of the matter is, so let's say it was 963 rainbow, or 963 two hearts rather, and the hearts brick in a 4-bet pot where he goes call, and we ultimately play 1,000 big blind pot. How often do you think that it matters if I do or don't block the nut flush draw there?
Probably a reasonable amount if he's going to follow through with it on the end.
Only if he's balanced. But you have to back up of what happened. He cold called a 3-bet, and then he called a 4-bet squeeze. That's never a balanced range. It just can't be.
It's just weighted toward good pairs.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what it's weighted towards. Like, I agree with you. It's pocket pairs, right? Mostly, like, that's our presumption.
Pocket pairs, ace queen suited, ace jack suited.
But like,
ace
yeah,
king.
no,
hell no.
no. He was like small blind. I was straddle. It was like cut off. Or sorry. I think I was the opener. I opened like under the gun, cut off 3 bets. He cold calls small blind. I 4-bet, cut off folds. He calls again. So it's just like, it's probably mostly pairs, but regardless of what the range construction is, it's not a balanced range construction because that doesn't happen in theory. There is no cold call range. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Right? So like the second that occurs, blockers don't really matter anymore. Because, how often is he going to have ace 7 of hearts there?
Not often, but his range is narrow as is. He has very limited combos.
Right.
So if you block all of the potential bluff combos that could potentially exist, it's more likely he has value.
Well,
It's more like he has value anyways.
it's more like he has value anyways, but like also what's more prevalent, king, queen of hearts or ace 10 of hearts? Tough to say.
Who knows?
Right?
Well, that's why you make your decision based off that, because it is tough to say.
Kind of, I guess.
Because it's tough to say.
I guess what I'm saying is like it's pretty easy to just exploitatively fold there because it's very unlikely that you're getting bluffed in those spots.
So the
Like my range is clearly strong.
Sure. It's just a matter of now you're saying, okay, I don't want to bluff catch because I don't think it's a bad idea. But theoretically, if you're looking at, because I've looked at cold call ranges, which do happen in some spots, it's the hands you think they are.
Right.
Which in those spots, it would be important to
But they're
not have.
never out of position.
No.
Right.
But like, it's more likely he has a suited hand than an offsuit if he calls.
That's true.
Like from offsuit or suited, not pair.
Right.
You have like 9s, 10s, jacks.
Yeah, that part's true.
And then suited hands. It's not going to be ace queen off.
I wish I could remember the actual action in the hand.
But it's not that important.
It's not that important, but like I feel like something weird happened. Like it came like 9-6-3, 2 hearts, and he just like led into me or something along those lines.
And you think he just has a set?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
What were you gonna say, Lamanna?
I was just saying that so you like blockers probably matter more the tougher the game, or like the more theoretical sound people are playing. Right?
Yes,
Because
I think
then
I think the closer to theory the
Yeah.
game plays, the more important blockers become.
Right. Like in a Triton high roller, they're gonna be thinking about blockers more and should be than you would be in your Bellagio game.
Well, that was my second thing I was going to say. Is I also think it matters stack depth. Like the more shallow the game, the more relevant they become as well, because ranges narrow faster.
Okay.
Right. Like you can't carry wide ranges through when SPR is 2.
Right.
Ranges just have to be pretty narrow once the SPR lowers tremendously. And I think for that reason, that general template that is mostly studied, which is 100 big blind, no ante poker, or if you're playing MTTs, sub 100 big blind anti-poker, that forces a much greater relevance on blockers. And that removal effect that your hand itself has will drive a lot of your strategies, whether or not you go polar or remain linear with a smaller sizing, whether or not you play check or bet, things along those lines. Like you will defer to the actual cards you hold, the suits you hold, etc. But you have to remember when you're curating a strategy, you don't start with your hand first, right? Like that's the last thing that you refer to whenever you're coming up with a spot. When I'm in a single raise pot in position and it checks to me, there's a big difference between ace 7 deuce and 7-6-5, right? Like regardless of what my hand is.
Right.
My global strategy on
different.
each of those board textures are going to be very different. Right. So I'm first and foremost going to look and say, what on average am I doing on this texture with range? And then I'll drill down to the hand and say, well, what does my hand want to do? and how relevant are, do I have a back door? Do I have a front door? Like, how relevant are these things? Do I remove his calls? Do I block his bluffs? Things along those lines, right? That's where you start to expand your thought process. But that certainly isn't the first layer of thinking. And when you're talking about introducing new people to the game, it's very convoluted to start them on that third or fourth layer of thinking when they already haven't solidified the first, second, and third. And that was just what I was kind of leading with to begin with, is the more refined we as long-standing players, high stakes players, coaches, whatever you want to categorize the people that have been around a while and studying, the further away we get from what we were like pre solvers and simulations, the more distance we have of not being able to relate to somebody who's new to the game. And I think that that's kind of like what Phil's ultimate point is stop fretting over something that isn't important information to you. Right now, it's just noise to you. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, it will become signal, but you have to learn a whole fuck ton of the game before you can actually gain any sort of relevance out of the key cards that you're holding.
Yeah, there's probably tons of people who don't study theory at all, but are like playing a game. They're like, well, I have this blocker, so I'm going to do this.
If you could play a live 1-3 game or a 2-5 game or whatever,
people
the case
talk about blockers like all the time,
right?
But they don't really. I don't know if they know what they're, how they're applying them, because they're not. They're not studied.
To like Phil's point, I just see so many people punting hard because they have what they deem to be a key card, but don't recognize that it's not congruent with the line that's been taken thus far.
Yeah.
Right. Like they have like, middle pair and the nut flush blocker, and they check call, and then the spades get there, and then they just like open rip river for pot and a half. And it's like, yeah, okay, man. Maybe you have a flush, but probably not.
Yeah.
I call, that kind of thing. Or, the inverse where they were the pre-flop aggressor and like they play two streets passively and then the flush completes on the river and, you either check or block into them and they just like blast for like 2 pots. And it's like, well, I've played with you enough to know that you don't check a flush draw twice. Like, God bless, show it to me. And they just show you what you think you'll see. The naked blocker with no pair, and they just felt inclined to bluff because they had to. So I do think that there's like obviously a lot of information to glean from your specific holding, but I think that there's a hierarchy through which we have to follow in our thought process. And if we start with our hand exactly, if that's the first thing that we examine and try to coordinate that with a strategy, most people are going to get lost.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the way that you never know, I mean, this like solver algorithm, how it comes up with these things, but in the Range Explorer, there's three different little graphs you can look at. EV, equity realization. So those 3 graphs are always there when you see a flop, and then when you put a different turn, you can then look and see the graphs and how things change. But like those things are much more important to understand first before looking at something else. Like if you understand how you gain EV with certain combos, how you gain EV with range, like what your equity is versus range. And you're not worried about hand versus range. You're worried about range.
I think that's a really
range.
great way of trying or like putting something tangible to blockers. Because most of the time, whenever you look at like the same candidate that are different suits, right? So for instance, let's say it's like a 2-tone board where you have ace king suited. And the ones that have the front door and back door flush draw have slightly higher EV than the ones that do not, right? But if you look at the EV differential, it's real, it's tangible. They're certainly worth more money in theory and practice.
For good reason, yeah.
Than the ones that don't have backdoors, but it's not significant enough to say that this is the first thing I should focus on, right? Like, sure, if we start to think about all of our candidates, now front door and backdoor draws are going to take priority over ones that don't. But the issue with that is then you ignore the power of not possessing the backdoors, right? So like, let's say you flop top pair with ace king suited on king XX 2-tone and don't possess a backdoor. That's now worth more than ace king that blocks the backdoor because you now unblock their calls, right? And that's important. And the issue is that if you just hone in on one aspect or the other of blockers, you miss the forest for the trees. Like you miss so much of what's driving this. And at the end of the day, there isn't like a variable in the algorithm for PO or any other solver out there that says like, what's the blocker? Like, what's the blocker impact of this card?
Right.
It doesn't think that way. It only cares about raw EV. And it can tangibly measure that, like, okay, this hand makes flushes more than the one that can't ever make a flush.
The EV of a barrel with a card is higher than the EV without, or the EV of a river bet or a flop C bet is greater with a flush draw suit or not.
But sometimes it goes the exact opposite way.
Yeah, well, it depends on.
Sometimes you want to be like doubling off or tripling off the one that has no blocker to the flush or backdoor flush.
You want them to have it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So it becomes very convoluted, and like it's not easy to look at. And Wizard has
It's not simple stuff.
right. Wizard and GTO check both have a blocker score of some sort. And when I do the analysis for on second thought, or when I had in the past, oftentimes when you're on the river, you're kind of like combing through the blocker score and stuff like. It's not as congruent as you would think. It's not like as if like the candidates that just have the highest blocker scores are the ones that you're taking the pure actions with.
Well, yeah, because sometimes you want to have the lower one to make the other person have the flush draw that misses, or
Yeah, I mean,
who knows?
They at least Wizard has like a positive and negative blocker score. So it has like a blocker score for blocking value and a blocker score for blocking
Oh, interesting.
folds.
That's cool.
So you can kind of like rank accordingly. And I think it's like a 1 to 10 scale. And I remember the last one that I was doing, I was looking at rivers to see like where bluff catches and bluffs were coming from and stuff like that. And I was looking at the hierarchy of the ranks, and basically like by the time we landed on the river, the majority of the hands that were 0 EV all had blocking scores of like 1. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So like, we're not leaning on that variable because the ranges got really tight by the time we got
It's
to
not
this
like
point.
this thing is a 10.
Yeah, there isn't something obvious here. That a lot of times you're just going to land at noise. I'm just like looking through and combing and combing and combing. It's like none of these candidates really have a better block score than the other. Like some would be like a 2 and a 1, others would be like a 1 and a 2, but they would just be like, it wouldn't be like one was clearly better than the other. They would just kind of be like sporadic throughout, and the EV was really close. It's just like, yeah, okay, so you just like, when you have a tight range, you kind of just land in this spot with a bunch of really difficult decisions with 0 EV hands. And that's the game, and that's why I hate to always bring it back to this, but that's where all the profit lies in live, because nobody's landing in that node and taking mixed action. Everybody's landing in that node and saying like, okay, well, my personality says that I just give up in this spot all the fucking time. So all of those hands that are supposed to be mixing at some frequency, just check, right? And other people are just like, well, I'm a fucking aggro monkey, so I land in this spot and I just bluff them all because I only have this one hand this one time in this one spot,
Right.
and I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And they take pure action in that regard. And I'm obviously being, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the spectrum is going to gravitate a lot more towards the tails than it is going to be somewhere in the middle. You're not going to find people who are just taking like 50-50 action with a grouping of 0 EV hands. Most people default to the risk aversion or risk tolerance.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of live poker specifically.
Yeah, it's pretty fair. It's the weird in between of like trying to figure out how important something is when you know its importance. Like you're trying to rank how important these things are because
Right.
they are, but at different levels of expertise, which is weird to say, but I guess effectively true. Like when you're looking at playing high rollers, these things are very important because
Yeah.
edges are smaller.
Imagine if we put a qualifier on. So first, I think like Phil's post echoes a lot of other things that have been said over the last 2 or 3 years. Like I remember not that long ago, somebody tweeted something along the lines of, if your coach starts talking to you about blockers in lesson 1, fire him. Because for a while, it was just like, it was very in vogue. It was the number one thing that was being focused on because people were just like being introduced to it. And obviously everybody was like wildly getting it wrong and misapplying, and that was even happening like at the teaching level and things like that. So it's this trickle down effect of misinformation that's being spread. And I think like if we just put a qualifier on it and said like, look, there's a certain progression that you're going to make in this game, and blockers are down the line. Like, understand how EV works first. Understand how equities work. Understand what dictates shifts in either of these things as far as board texture goes. Understand range morphology and like how things change from pre-flop to flop, flop to turn, turn to river, and how narrowing takes place. Understand all of those things at a general level. And then maybe we can start to drill down to the candidate level and look at, the suits of cards or what the exact removal effect is of having an ace in this situation. We do it pre-flop. We say like, oh, ace king removes an ace and a king from the deck. So how often am I going to run into aces and kings? Like, well, still some of the time.
And sometimes it's 100% of the time in certain constraints.
Yeah, you start to play 6-bet pot when you're 500 big blinds deep.
You're just going to see it.
You're probably going to see aces and kings a lot.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not even kings.
Yeah.
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 Sure.
Maybe not kings.
Torres is like, what? 6 bets, kings? Yeah, fucking right.
I mean, it does start to get scary when each bet goes in and you just start saying to yourself, like, I don't think he has queens anymore.
Yeah, right.
Fuck, we're
You
dead.
can't play the ace king queen game without the queen.
Right. Right. It's a little bit scary. And the true terror of ace king is that you're up against ace king also. It's like the ultimate game of chicken.
Yeah.
Where you're playing chicken against a speeding Mack truck that could also just have aces in range.
You're playing chicken coke.
Yeah. And you don't have aces because you're staring down at ace king.
I know I'm looking at ace king.
right.
So it's just like, is this the time that I die?
Right.
I don't want to die.
Yeah.
Don't kill me.
This stuff still even happens in cash. Like 100 big blinds, no, like 6 max. Like low jack opens, button 3 bets, you cold 4 big blind with ace king off, and you get jammed on. You just have fold with ace king off.
Yeah.
Like you're just allowed to fold versus a 5 bet.
That's the easy scenario. Triple your stack depth now.
Yeah.
And it's not a jam. It's a 5-bet click.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now what?
Now you 6 bet, fold 7 bet. At some point they have to have it, right? Like it's weird because like you kind of pay a price to figure out what they have.
the betting to find out where you're at.
Yeah, betting to find out where you're at. There you go.
It is a weird conundrum because when you start to look at like deep stack preflop ranges, most of them stop at the 6-bet.
Yeah.
They just like either start ripping for a wild amount where like they'll just 6-bet jam for 500 bigs and only have a range of like kings, a little bit of aces, and a little bit of ace king, or they just like don't 6-bet much. Or sorry, they 6-bet not all in and never 7-bet type of thing. Like when I had my heads up ranges, we had all the way up to 1,000 big blinds, and everything from 400 to 1,000 just stopped at 6-betting. Yeah. We just we're in the streets if we get 7-bet. Mm-hmm. Like what do we do?
You hope you have aces when you get 7.
Right. It's like you get 7-bet, and if you're not holding aces, what do you convince yourself of? Because the other thing is that whenever you choose not to really take it to the next step of 7-betting, you manipulate your sizes to reflect as much. You know that like you're only going to 6-bet call moving forward. So you want to leave room for a 7-bet that's not all in.
Right.
Because you have other hands that aren't aces, even though it's at a very low frequency. And it just gets like, it becomes a bit of
nonsense.
I don't know if nonsense is the word, but like it does kind of demonstrate that at some point you reach a critical mass where
how many pre-flop bets going before it's only aces?
Right, like well, sort of in theory, yeah, but the vision moving forward, if anybody chooses to disobey that, is just like gone, right? Like
you're saying, what do you do if you face someone that doesn't do this?
Well, yeah, say you extrapolate it out to like 10,000 big blinds effective, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I assume what would I've never run this, but I assume what would happen is the sizings would greatly alter.
You probably have to like find a bigger size for a 4-bet or for a 5-bet.
You would think that almost everybody would be incentivized to size larger.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe what would actually happen is like out of position players just like don't really want to put money in the middle. Ever.
So stupid.
Right? Like it's like we just got to see rivers before we start to funnel money in the middle because we're so fucking deep.
Yeah.
In which case now like things start to break down a little bit and you just kind of lose sight over the normal quote unquote game tree of sorts.
It's a weird thing to get to the always never where like someone has ace king where the other range never does and they just jam for like 30x pot.
Right. Well, that's the other thing that's obviously available is like aces become a very big weapon pre where you still have the capacity to be all in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's just like if your range is even capable of having aces, can suddenly start making very large wagers, the 10x 4-bets and things along those lines. But the whole thing that I'm getting at is it does kind of just turn into this giant game of chicken. And when people just don't give a fuck and start saying like, well, I'm just going to stay linear. and make somebody do something about it. Because I don't care if I put in 300 big blinds pre when we're 10,000 big blinds effective. I'm just going to win a lot of money after the flop when he's forced to try to show down his one pair, and we're at an SPR of 12.
It's sure.
You know? Right. No, it's ridiculous, but like I see it all the time. I play in a game where basically almost everybody is somewhere between 500 and 2,000 big blinds effective.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just like a lot of linear cold 4 betting. Like today I 3-bet queens on the button versus middle position open. Small blind, just cold 4s 8 high. You know? Not really a thing.
Here we are.
Not going to really work out all that well for you.
They didn't also have a 7 in their hand, right?
They did, but
oh, man.
But like it does freeze me. I can't do a lot of 5 betting with queens because you play a 2,000 big blind pot with queens, you're an asshole.
Asshole.
You know, like at least pre-flop. You know, maybe you can do it after, but like you don't really want to play a 2,000 big blind pot with queens pre. And it's like, okay, so you call, now it comes ace high, and you're just in hell. You know, so it's like, what are we doing? We're just set mining with queens now. Like none of these sound like really great outcomes, and all of a sudden 4 betting 8 high doesn't seem all that terrible.
Well, this is kind of what.
No lies.
It's funny you say that because this is what kind of creates game theory as a whole.
Right.
Right.
Right. It's iterating.
Because if you know that someone's iterating with these hands, queens becomes a value 5 bet.
For sure.
Even though you feel like the asshole.
You
like,
just size differently.
Yeah.
You just click so much more because those hands are not going to be incentivized to put it in a 6 bet. They're going to want to call and try to outflop you.
Yeah.
At least that's going to be the mentality, whether that's the incentive or not. But no matter what, I mean, like when you have 8 high, if you put in the big 5 bet, 8 high just gets naturally folded. And now you get fucked versus the polar range.
Right.
You put in the small 5 bet, and now he starts making calling mistakes. And that's the ideal, I think. But that's kind of like the tricky thing, right? Is that you basically curate a polarized range that chooses something that reflects a linear size.
Well, because then you play the game of what do you do if you get 6 bet?
Right.
And they click you.
Right.
And this is, well, it's funny you say this because this is what happens a lot in MTTs nowadays. Like there's definitely a ton of like clicking wars with pre-flop because pre-flop becomes super important, especially in ICM spots.
For sure.
So it's like you play a game of like aces, not aces. Or like in some spots you don't 3-bet kings at all because of stack depth and distributions, where if you are going to mess with someone, you play a game of aces, not aces.
Right.
And at some point, someone is the chicken.
Right.
Someone is the chicken or someone doesn't have aces.
And I think that's kind of, to bring this all the way back to blockers and kind of, maybe wrap up this discussion. I think that's kind of where it all went wrong, is that's how strategies are built whenever you are talking about pre-flop or post, right? Pre-flop strategies are built around aces. Aces are not aces.
Right.
Every action you take is going to be built around what does aces want to do, right? And then from there, you'll just populate the hands that help benefit aces in some sort of capacity. When you get to post, it becomes a matter of like, can I make the nuts or not, kind of thing, right? Like, what's the probability of making a 5-card hand versus not making a 5-card hand? So everything that you do strategically is built around the hand classes that can make a 5-card hand. And from there, you populate that out and use those to protect hands that are only going to make like a 3-card hand, like, an overpair or 2-pair type of holdings, whatever. Those are like your showdown driven hands. And then, you curate some bluffs that are going to mimic 5-card hands. But the majority of your strategy is going to be built around like nuts down.
Yeah.
And that's not that hard to figure out from a conceptual standpoint, but it's impossible if you have no vision over range construction, right? If you don't know what hands are and are not in your opponent's range at a high concentration, if you don't understand your own range and like what hands you do and don't have at a high concentration, looking at a single card and saying like, oh,
this is it.
He has the nuts a lot less when I have this. Time to blast off. That's a great way to fucking torch a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, especially when you start getting into the in-betweens of what people's calling thresholds is.
Right.
Where if it's not just the nuts only, and they might call you with like 2-pair or something.
Right,
like,
right.
they would fold this hand.
Right.
They don't.
Yeah.
Not.
And
Or if you're playing
that
against-
gets into sizing.
And you're playing against somebody who understands how lines work, and like you said, you can just see through a line that doesn't make sense, and then you try to blast off, and then you're just looking at.
You know how many times I've looked down and
doesn't make
had
any
like
sense call.
the nut flush blocker and face like a river jam, and I just go,
What are you doing?
This
Like,
makes no fucking.
Yeah.
How are you doing that when I have this?
Right.
like the flush card fell and you're all in.
Yeah.
And what you just often realize is like, oh, well, they just have something slightly worse that's the nuts
Right.
to them.
Yeah.
You know, they just have the
they
third
gave
nut flush.
King, queens. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they just don't want to miss value, and
Right.
they're fuck you jamming.
Mm-hmm.
They don't recognize like, oh, when I have this hand, you know, I want to play it to protect the rest of my. They don't care.
You can certainly skill
They make
tax
flush.
yourself.
Yeah,
Like you
They
can
make
bluff
flush.
catch. Like yeah, they make flush basically. Like you bluff catch with a hand that would theoretically win, but you lose because they have a hand that beats you,
Right.
where you don't account for it. Skill tax.
that's a great way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's like it kind of is what levels the playing field in the short term. Whenever you're talking about like very skillful players being in these, let's call them haphazard environments. Something similar to like a WPT 3500 is a great example, right? Field is very soft for the majority of the time. Final tables get a little bit tougher. There are a lot of fucking great players who enter those fields and don't care about their opposition enough to not skill tax themselves.
Yep.
Whereas there are a lot of inferior players that are hypersensitive
What
to
do you
their
mean by
environment.
skill tax?
What Landon kind of just said, where you're just like playing so by the book, you don't make an adjustment for the fact that like this doesn't
Right.
make sense because I have this blocker, right? Where in theory it's like, oh, I have this blocker, I call,
Yeah.
right? You don't try to put two and two together, but like whenever you're hypersensitive to your environment, you say like, well, that doesn't make sense. I have this hand, so I block their bluffs, and I block their nutted value that could potentially do this. Like, how are they still jamming into me? It's like, oh, they just overvalued some other value hand.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they just jammed a set and don't give a fuck that you might have the nut flush, right? And there are a lot of inferior players that I don't have a great term for it, but like almost reverse skill tax themselves. Like they make a lot of fucking money by navigating these spots incredibly well and putting themselves in a position to make a lot of money at endgame in spite of the fact of being massively inferior players.
Right.
And I think there's a very large subset of these guys on tour and MTTs that like could never compete in high rollers and Tritons and in poker go events or whatever, but are making 7 figures a year competing at the 3,500 level and below.
I see some. I've come across some players where like I've seen like I'll see a tweet where like, oh, this is like my 7th win of this month or something like that, and I'll click on their Hinden mob and they just have massive results. I'm like, I've never heard of this person.
Right.
I don't know who these people are. Like, what is going on? And it's just maybe it's just like you said, these players who are doing that, the reverse skill tax, and they're just mashing.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's as long as we've been in the game, right? Like the guys we've always seen triumph live are guys that aren't the most studious bunch.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think Chance is a great example because I think he understands theory pretty deeply.
sure.
But I lean on him as an example because he does so many unorthodox things that just completely disobey theory. And, you know, you look at it and you just say, well, this guy's just a fucking clicker and he's been sun running for 20 years. I was like, well, probably not.
No.
You know?
It's like here the guy walking with like a man on fire meme. We're like, I got guapo. I got you. Anyways, go on.
There's nothing to get.
Should have.
That's
I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know where we were going with
Guapo
this.
got you, don't worry.
Yeah,
you
my
look
man.
like you need a nap. You look like you've been through the ringer, Landon. I mean, I know you just lost 2 dogs
I did.
over the last 24 hours.
All right,
You're very upset about that.
I'm upset about it. Well, the only reason why I even cared in the first place is 'cause, like, it feels bad when like animals go back to not
Good situations.
good situations,
Yeah.
and then you don't like. I didn't want to be like sole responsibilitator. It's not the right word.
Nope.
You
Of
did
the
never
animals. Well, yeah.
that was the whole point.
Okay, you can pay $1,500 a month to keep the
Well, that
dogs.
was the point of 1,500. You wouldn't be the sole responsibility of it.
Yeah. You were paying for my services. You were paying for my adulthoodness.
Well, you
Big
said-
skill tax, buddy.
Sometimes you got to do it. Don't worry. I don't think this is the last we've seen of Royal and Kobe.
They're getting new names.
I think they're going to make their way back to us. I have a feeling. a very sneaky suspicion.
Berkey wants these dogs more than anybody. I
He
just
just
want to
wanted-
let you know
Look, he
that.
just wanted $18K a year from me, but now
I
he's
was
not
well
getting it.
aware of this for a while, but I'm pretty
He
like,
understands all the reasons why he shouldn't have the dogs, but he
wants
wants
them.
to just be forced to have the
Yeah,
dogs.
exactly.
He's like, there's nothing I can do about
Give
it. They
him
just
one
keep showing
reason.
up at my house. Like, I have to take them in.
That's
It's pretty much how I got 4 roommates.
there's no lies told there.
They just show up at my house. I gotta take them in.
Corey was the only one I asked for. All the rest of you fucking vagabonds just showed up with a goddamn bag of clothes.
I showed up here first.
Man.
Everybody showed up here first.
This was the testing
Everybody has to
grounds.
go through their little trial phase.
Their
Yeah.
quarter at the office.
Yeah, can you keep the office clean? I should have known better with Melissa.
Oh, she stayed at the
Fucking
office.
snake lady.
Oh man.
That's going to do it for us today. We will be back again tomorrow evening, 6 p.m.
Oh,
Pacific, as I think that'll be the time slot for the rest of this week.
how did we come up with these time slots?
I have games.
Based off of when you have games.
Yeah, I just have games. I got to be there at 10 a.m. I don't want to do 8 a.m. because then I don't get the gym.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's unfortunate for you. The show revolves around me. My apologies.
Okay.
You know, my sidekick has to do some work. You know, we give him these responsibilities, so we let him pick the time sometimes. You know, whatever.
Look,
It is what it is.
I don't have
man.
to pay Husky money anymore, but it doesn't mean I'm not getting money anymore.
All
You're
right.
doing great, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. That'll do it for us. We'll see you guys all tomorrow, 6 p.m.
Later, squad.
Peace.